Hello, possibility seekers. We're back. We've got a fun guest today. I want to tell you all about her. I have to tell you, this is going to be a great conversation. Her name is Juliet Wright. She's a bold visionary and parallel entrepreneur with a talent for turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. As a keynote speaker, published author, and founder of a successful branding agency, she has spent the last decade helping elevate over 250 brands worldwide. Julia is known for connecting the dots and creating strong, cohesive brand ecosystems that build confidence, serving for a catalyst for breakthrough growth. With her creativity and fresh insights, she helps authors, entrepreneurs, and teams break free from good enough to build brands that they are absolutely in love with. So, as you can already see, we have a lot in common. It's going to be a fun conversation. Welcome, Juliet. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, today we are going to lean into your mom and entrepreneurhood because you have a great story. You have three daughters.
3 daughters and a son. Yes, I'm raising 4 teenagers and even have an exchange student right now at our house. So technically 5 teenagers are in my care right now.
Okay, where do you want the care package to go?
Exactly. Yes, please. And that's what I hear most often whenever I tell people I have 4 teenagers, they're always like, "Oh," I always get this look of like, yeah, like blink twice if you need help. But honestly, having 3 teenage daughters has been the most fun, and every year I'm like, "This is my favorite, this is my favorite," and I just feel like it's getting better and better, and so there have been a few days where they'll all go to homecoming at once or all go to prom, and it's like a lot of trips to Walgreens for hairspray, but for the most part, it is like the best. It's just the best, and I love having that side to talk about with women, especially women entrepreneurs, that you can have it both.
Yeah. So we're leaning into Juliet's the entrepreneurship side and modeling and having daughters and talking about setting examples and all of that kind of thing. I wanted you to give us start with giving us a little bit of background into your journey into motherhood so we can set the stage for the rest of the conversation.
Absolutely. I always grew up babysitting. That was my first job. I had a blended family growing up. So I was near the end of 7 siblings. And so my older step siblings were having their families when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. So I was always babysitting. I even moved in with my stepsister when I was 15. She became a single mom to a newborn. And I moved in with her, what I thought was gonna be for a couple weeks. She actually attempted suicide after her husband left with a newborn baby.
How old was she? You were 15 and how old was she?
I was 15, she was 20, and just a few days after the baby was born, the husband left, and, my family was kind of in crisis mode, and it was kinda like, "Well, Juliet's the babysitter, like, she can go stay with her for a week or 2." The doctors, when she was released from the hospital, said, "I don't think she should go home alone." Now in hindsight, I'm like, I don't know that I would send my 15-year-old to go stay with someone with a newborn who just got released from suicide watch at the hospital, but for my family, that was the best solution, and so, so I'd always kind of helped with babies and newborns, and then I got engaged at 19 and shortly after found out that I was expecting my first daughter. And so we had her at 20, and then I had my second at 22, my third at 23, and my fourth at 25. And so now I look at these 25-year-olds and I think, you look so young. But at the time, while most teen moms were kind of freaking out, I was like, "Oh, I got this." Like, I'd already had experience at that point, and, I don't know how, probably just, like, fearlessness, blind, I don't enthusiasm, I don't know, but it was definitely a wild ride.
Indeed, it was. I mean, I think about that too. My mom had me when she was 20 with a couple months, and I think I look at my son who's 24 and my daughter was 28, and I go, "Uh-uh." What do you think our daughters do better than we did at their age? And then I'm gonna reverse the question.
Yeah, I think my daughters, they see bigger than the world that they was right in front of them. I feel like when I was that age, it was like the only things I knew were my friends at school, the activities I was in, my job. Like, I feel like I had a very narrow kind of world. And I feel like my daughters, at least, and most kids this age, I just feel like they know what's going on. They know, about different places they want to vacation. They know about Spain. They know about different foods. They know what avocados are. I didn't know what an avocado was. They just feel like they're just worldly. And I live in central Nebraska. So it's not like, we have a ton of culture around here, but I just feel like they are just so much more exposed, probably good and bad. But I think the good side is they just know so much more than I knew.
And where do you think they struggle?
I mean, there's 2 sides to every coin, but it's like they know so much that it's you think about, "Where do I wanna go?" For example, my 19-year-old, she graduated high school, and it's like, for her graduation party, her and all of her friends had Pinterest boards full of, what the dessert table was gonna look like and what the card thing was gonna look like, and, I mean, it was almost as if they were planning little mini weddings, and so it's like, they have all this information, but I think where they struggle is they can find inspiration, inspo boards of everything, and hard to live up to those Pinterest perfect boards, especially when you're combining 20 of them into one party.
Oh god, I can only imagine. So is it FOMO? Is it kinda like what is the deal? What is that what happens when they're surrounded by the perfect?
Yeah, I think it's like, what's possible, but it's in some ways they know it's not real, but it is real because it's a photo, but you also I think that's that hard piece. It is that FOMO in some way, and it's that false expectation. So I think the challenge is it's like in your brain, you know that this is just a mock setup, or you know that there's interior designers. That might not even be real food. You know it to a degree, but I do think there's still that like striving for that perfection, which I think is hard for everyone, and especially teenage girls.
Right, exactly. So where was it was easier for us because we didn't have any of that.
Yeah, we had nothing. I mean, my graduation party was like 3 bags of chips and 2 liters of pop, and, like, I called it good. I think we used whatever paper plates my church basement had, and, like, that's all I knew, and it was a great party, and it's like, we just didn't know.
Ignorance is bliss in some ways, right?
Hopeless. I'm so glad that that didn't exist as I was trying to plan all this.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it is a different inspiration set and a different because in the middle of Nebraska, you have your daughters sort of benchmarking against somebody who might live in an urban sprawl in some mountain.
Yeah, they'll show, like, this beautiful table with an ocean outlooking and these beautiful canopies, and it's like, then we try to move that to our kitchen, and it's just not the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you think social media plays a role in this kind of FOMO, perfectionism, worldliness that is kind of false because they're not there?
Yeah. And again, kinda like we know it's not real, but it still kind of is. I feel like it's the same with social media. It's like you can see this like, my girls will talk about they'll be, one of their friends that's in a relationship, and they post this really cute picture at this and they have matching cowboy hats at this concert, it's so cute. But then they also know that they spent the night arguing, and they also know that he called her best friend a name or whatever, and so I do think social media, it is this facade that we all have to navigate, but I think it is this challenge. It's like, even when there's hard things going on, there's this pressure to post our highlight reel and not just say, "Okay, this concert sucked, I had an awful time, I'm not gonna post it," but instead it's like this pressure that it's like, because I had the cowboy hat, because I'm at this concert, like, there's almost this obligation to prove that you are doing anything in life, which is really sad because that might not even be a night that you wanna look back on, even on your memories, you know? So I think that's the hard piece. It's like this pressure to show the world. It's kind of this joke even in marketing. It's like we're so busy with life that we don't have time to do social media. But if you don't do social media, people think you're not doing anything. And it's like this weird paradox.
I wanna put a pin in that. That is so true. It's a conversation I've had with clients too, which is sort of sad. So what does a dinner conversation look like at your house? Maybe now with the exchange student is slightly different, but let's just take it to the real world. And what is a real life dinner conversation based on they've seen mom as a okay, so let's contextualize this. You have a young mom, you have multiple children in one family, and you're an entrepreneur, and you've been an entrepreneur for a while. So, what does that look like now?
Yeah, I started my business at 18 and had my daughter at 19, and so they really when I say they've been along this journey with me, I mean, literally, like, I was a photographer at the time, I had a studio, I mean, literally, I had, a baby in a carrier and one another in a swing as I'm doing photo shoots. I mean, when I say they've lived this entrepreneur journey with me, they truly have. We actually live downtown above my studio, so it's like a co-working living space. I remember we'd have staff members, a full team in a meeting, and one of the kids would walk in just casually and, say like, "Hey, do you know where my backpack is?" And it's like, having to explain that we're having a meeting with a client, like but they've just lived this, like, integrated life, and they never really understand, like, working hours or privacy or anything like that. But our conversations are often about, just choices, and I just honestly had a conversation with my 17-year-old today just talking about the conversation we were having was, trading your time for an hourly rate versus people who are successful. If you look at anyone, it's they have a product, they have an influence, they have something where they're not trading dollar per minute. And just those kind of conversations that, and the whole conversation started because she was talking about her favorite singer and just how she's hit it big. And it's like, think about that. Like for years, she invested and she did the work and she probably lost money and she was exhausted. And now she's hit it huge. So if you went back and if you said, "I'll pay you $20 an hour from the beginning," it couldn't even equate to what it is today. So it's kind of like that idea that the math doesn't math, but that's how dreams work and that's how entrepreneur life works. And, we have to chase those dreams. We have to take those risks. And so I'm a huge risk taker. If there's a scale 1 to 100, I'm probably 100, maybe 101. And so anytime they're like, "I have an idea," or, "What do you think about this?" That's where the conversation always goes. What's the risk? What's the payoff? What are you willing to lose? How much of your own skin are you willing to put in the game? What would this look like if I help finance it? Like, it's really conversations, but I would say most of them are around risk because I feel like to be an entrepreneur that's the game you have to master. It's all about risk and how comfortable you are with it and when to fold, when to go for it. And once you can get that down, I think then any industry, any career, anything, you can do it.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things there we can unpack. One is, in an entrepreneurial setting, you eat what you kill, so you have to be betting on yourself. So if there's a lack of self-confidence or belief, there's gonna be a problem with entrepreneurship, I think. And I think you're smart to bring forward the idea of risk and the ROI. And this notion that, when people are successful, I always like to say, oh, yeah, she's an overnight success 15 years later. Because you haven't heard about her for 15 years, but she's been doing the work. She's been doing the work, like to your point. And then all of a sudden, but for her, it's not all of a sudden, it's what she has earned the right to claim. So I think it's kinda cool. So you have these conversations with your daughters, and what's the response? What's the listening for this?
I mean, at some point, they think it's a lecture, and kids like to hear that. But for the most part, I think that they are really receptive. I think we have really good conversations about it. Oftentimes, they have so many case studies around them because they have friends whose parents think very differently. They have friends in college, they have friends in trade school, and so in some ways it's like they have this huge focus group that's living and breathing that they're learning. For example, like a lot of my kids' friends are freshmen in college right now. Some of them are thriving, some of them are not, and it's, like, just even those conversations of, what's different, why, some of it's personality, some of it's there's a lot of variables, but unpacking that a little bit versus saying college is good or college is bad, but also understanding, like, well, for this person with this personality or these goals or this family situation, I don't know. So I think the conversations that we like to have are unpacking it deeper than surface level.
So not binary. It's not a yes or no. It's not a good or bad. It's more black or white. It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, because again, an overnight success, that I feel like is very black and white. Like, wow, they won a Grammy. But it's like, but again, let's look under a little bit and like let's think about what really happened and friendships that may have been lost and family that like there's so much more. And I just think those conversations are just they're just helpful in so many ways and it just gives us a bigger perspective, which I mean, who doesn't want more perspective in their life?
Well, you'd be surprised. No, I'm kidding. You don't hang out with those people, apparently. No, but it's true. So how does has being an entrepreneur shaped your view of business, money, and independence, and how, and in some ways, you parent these young girls?
Yeah, one thing I remind my kids a lot and I think of a lot, my dad was a farmer, my mom was a kindergarten teacher, and so they didn't my dad had time freedom in some degree, but during harvest season, it was like, don't expect him for 3 months, and my mom as a kindergarten teacher, she had a stable job, but she did not have time freedom in a way that, if I wanted her to come to a field trip or if I had something at school that was 2 hours in the afternoon, like, she couldn't get a substitute teacher so that she could come watch, a play at school or something that was in the middle of the day. So one thing I always talk about is, like, yes, financial freedom, there's importance to that, absolutely. But also, I don't think that we talk enough about time freedom and to be able to go to a cross country meet in the middle of the day, to be able to have lunch with a friend if they're in town. Like those things that I just don't feel like we're talking to young people with enough because oftentimes as they're choosing their career, they're like, this profession makes this much, this one makes this much. I'm going to go for the higher one. But it's like, that's only one piece of the puzzle. And you can't put a value on being a chaperone, in a 4th grade field trip. There's some of those things that I missed out on my parents being able to do that is really important for me to have that time freedom even more than the financial freedom.
Yeah, I mean, it is a calculation. It's a choice. I talk about that in my book. It's like, what's the true cost of your job, right? The salary is one component, but you have travel time, you have expenses. Once you're there, you have childcare, you have commutation, you have dry cleaning, expensive lunches, whatever the case may be. And then what is your time flexibility worth to you? What does that impact on your family dynamic?
Yeah, and I still work a lot of hours, Yeah, but it's that idea that, like, yeah, I might be working, with the laptop on my lap as we're watching a movie at night, but also I took 3 hours off in the middle of the day. So it's kind of this idea because in some ways, probably the biggest stinger that I hear that my kids have said, and not too often, but this idea that you're always working, that one just is like a dagger to my heart. But also when I work in our offices in our house, I think it's different because I don't drive to an office, and so I'm a little bit more, like, front and center when I'm working. But then it's also reminding them, like, "Yeah, I'm working today, but remember last Thursday when we took the whole day off and went to the zoo?" Like, there has to be that sometimes we remember the bad, but we don't remember the good. So it's been a lot of conversations of it doesn't look like normal work schedules, but there's always a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of a fan of work-life integration than I am a fan of balance because I don't think there is such a thing as balance, and I always like to say, like, you can't have it all at the same time. You can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. So if you want mom on the field trip, mom's gonna have to work in the evening. If you want to go away to a nice resort for vacation, someone's gonna have to,
Yeah, I might have to check emails for an hour. Yeah, I might check emails in an hour, but then you other me the rest of the day, and we get to stay longer than most families, and it is that yeah, that idea. I agree with you on the integration. It's all about just how does this ebb and flow and not be resentment and just be understanding and grace, just a lot of grace that, we're all just doing the best we can.
Do you think any one of your kids will be an entrepreneur themselves? Do you get that sense from them?
Yeah, my oldest daughter, I think, will be an entrepreneur just because she's a challenger. And so if something doesn't make sense, so she's the most well-behaved first child, oldest daughter, straight A's, but also if something doesn't make sense, she's going to challenge it. And like even in school, they'd have a day where they said, catch up on assignments or you can just play on your phone or play Uno. And she would call and say, "Okay, come call me out," because she was like this challenge of like, "I'll be here if there's something to do, but if there's not, I have more valuable things to do. I wanna go run for cross country. I wanna go work." And so I don't see her working a traditional employment job just because she's a challenger. She's actually in flight school right now, and even on her tour of the flight school, the flight academy, he was talking about a couple of different places that she could work afterwards, and really politely, as a 17-year-old girl, she said, like, "Oh, I really would appreciate any introductions, but I'm actually gonna own my own, charter company." And the instructor is like, "I've never heard a student say that before." And, so she has really big ideas of not just working, but owning a charter company and, big ideas, and she'll pull it off because she's just that wired. My second daughter is an entertainer. We don't know what she'll do. It might be in hospitality, it might be I said if she could just work on a cruise ship, like, and be the vibe team, that would be her dream job. So I don't know what that'll look like, but I don't think it'll be traditional. I think it could be sales. I think it could be I don't know, but she's an entertainer, she's a magnetic personality.
Yeah, I wonder where these kids get this spark from. I have no idea.
Well, I try to encourage her to, like, do a po I don't know, she's kinda my wild card, I don't know what she'll do. I think my 3rd daughter, I think she'll be pretty traditional. I could see her as, like, a nurse, I could see her as a homemaker. I think she'll be my most traditional, because she really kinda likes that structure. I don't think she's an entrepreneur. And I think my son's an engineer in some way. He's only 13. So I could see my younger 2 working, not being an entrepreneur. My second's a wild child, and so I don't know, it's funny again how you raise them all in the same house, and they're all so different. But I'm someone I do believe that by 18 months, somewhere around there, 2 years old, I do believe that their personalities kinda develop, and at least for my kids, who they are is who they are. Like, I probably could have predicted those jobs when they were 18 months old. I shoulda, like, wrote it on an envelope and, like, sealed it and, like, opened it someday.
That's so funny. What would you give as advice to a woman who's listening to this podcast and thinking she wants to consider or is considering being an entrepreneur? What are the sage advice that you would push forward?
Yeah, my advice would say take everything in your life into account. Where you wanna live, the house you wanna live in, the kids you wanna have, take everything and as if it's, you know, pieces of a puzzle or more just pieces on a table and then start connecting the dots. My background's actually in photography. I started a photography business 2 weeks out of high school, was doing senior photography, family photography. I would take my kiddos to the studio with me. And then when I had 4, I could no longer be doing photo shoots. I was more of a distraction than a photographer. And so I transitioned to doing only weddings. And for about 8 years while I stayed home with my kids, I shot weddings every weekend. And I felt like that was ideal because I still got to put on makeup and be social, but then I could edit behind the scenes. Once my kids were all in school, I transitioned again to corporate photography because I wanted to work 8 to 5 like they did. And so my advice is to find a career or start a business that can evolve and mold and change as your family does, because there's a lot of things out there, but just knowing that your business is probably not gonna look the same when you have a newborn as when you have a 5-year-old, as when you have a 10-year-old, and that's okay, and I think if you can kind of mold your business to your family goals versus the other way around, and this is not always gonna work out. I mean, I've missed things, I've missed choir concerts, I've missed things, but I also feel like I was able to stay home with them, which was a goal of mine. I was able to, again, have the time freedom, and now I travel a lot, and they actually get to travel with me quite a bit. They've got to go to some networking events with me and meet some really incredible entrepreneurs because now this is a phase of life I'm in. As I go do keynote speaking, sometimes my daughters come with me and they get to see me on stage and they get to be in the green room with me and things like that. So now it's like this next phase for me, which is a lot of traveling and networking, and they're getting to come along on that ride too. So I would just encourage women to, really think about what your goals are and in both arenas and figure out, be creative, think outside the box. It doesn't have to be a one way straight line. It can be kind of a winding course, and that's okay.
Exactly. What's your why again? So Juliet and I are also why certified coaches. So what's your why again? I forget.
I'm better way, make sense challenge.
Got it. Okay. So you and your daughter make a fine pair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's probably yes, yes. So, yeah, my better way, again, that's where my brain I'm always just looking for 1% better, what makes sense, how can we improve this? If I was gonna do this again, what would I do different? Yeah, what's your why again? Remind me.
Contribute, make sense, and simplify.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just like, give me the bottom line. Just my whole book was my literally I did the why as I was finishing up the book, and then I reverse engineered. That's what I was going to say before. Introducing the why into the beginning chapters, and I realized that the way I went about writing the book and the way that I went about explaining my 7 concepts for a successful life or a life you love, et cetera, were all about simplification and making sense out of really complicated topics. And I'm like, well, there it is. If this isn't just an output of what I just said, I don't know. So it's funny how we have to give ourselves grace and also acknowledge what our strengths are and our weaknesses.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love when Gary Sanchez, who created YOS, I love when he says, "Little salt good, lot of salt bad." It's like there's always that good, and then, which I see a lot, but then it's also like when I acknowledge like for me with my better way, oftentimes my wheels don't turn off. And so it's like, because there's always a 1% better. And so I'll be laying in bed and think about a 1% better way to load the dishwasher or, whatever, something so silly, and it's like, just because it's like this always which I think has been a blessing, but also just like anything I have to keep it in check for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I see your point. So for me, the contribute is the same. It's like just because somebody said that they were looking for a solution to fill in the blank, lose weight, go to the gym more, eat healthier, time manage doesn't mean that you have to jump into solution mode for them.
Yeah, but you want to, your heart, like, wants to help, right? Because that's who you are.
Yeah, I know it's well, you learn one of the other trainings I've done teaches you that sometimes your strength is actually your Achilles heel if you look at the flip side of it. So it's interesting. But anyway, so the question I love to wrap up with is what would you tell your 30-year-old self if you had a chance to say something to her?
This is actually an interesting question, and I don't need to go too deep, but I actually so my husband that I had my 4 beautiful kids with, at 29 years old, myself, my 4 kids left abuse with the clothes on our backs, and we started completely over. I had $3.74, 4 little kids, fighting a battle for protection orders and victims advocates and lawsuits and custody and everything. It was a 3.5-year battle, and so that was right at 30, so it's kinda interesting because I got married and was having babies at 20. At 30, I started completely over, not only completely over, but also with a lot of fear and a lot of health conditions from stress and just really in a hard place. And now in May, I'll be 40. And so it's interesting that these like decades in some ways have lined up almost evenly for me with 20, 30, and 40. But so at 30, what I would tell her, who was living in an 800 square foot duplex with 4 kids. My mom was also living with us on hospice at the time. I mean, it was a hard time, and, I've actually written a letter to that version of myself and just said, "Just hang in there, and you're doing it." And every day, it just when I think of that 30-year-old self, it's like
That was only a decade ago, Julia. That was only a decade.
only a decade ago, and it was just like it was every day, it was and really what God has told me this year was, I had 5 years of survival, which would have been that 30 to 35. I had 5 years of growth, and now this next season when I turn 40 is a season of abundance, and so this idea of, like but when I think back to 30, I was truly in survival, and so if I could tell her now, it's like, just one foot in front of the other, just hang in there, and the other thing I would tell her is accept help. There were a handful of people during that season who reached out to help, whether that was to give me silverware that I didn't have, whether that was to give a kid a ride, whether that was to pay for a month of gymnastics, whatever it was, and I think I did a okay job. Again, I had a handful of people that did help me during that time, but I still turned a lot away, and I wish I would've just, like, held my hands open a little more and just said, like, "Just thank you, thank you." Instead, it was like I was always trying to push it away a little bit or justify it or "I'll pay you back."
Was it pride?
It was pride, and I think it was just this idea that I was trying to prove to myself that I could do it, and I think I was trying to prove to everyone else that I could do it, and I did, but it was a lot harder than I think it needed to be. If I just had to know that I can do it and accepting help is still doing it, then I think I would have struggled a lot less. And now I actually have a good friend of mine who's going through a similar situation. And every time I try to help her, she always kind of stiff arms me a little bit. And I'm just like trying to tell her this of like, she was one that was there for me and now 10 years later, I'm able to be there for her, and I'm like, "Just let me help you," you know? That's it's hard, but, I think that's a lesson we all need to hear.
Yeah. I think, I didn't come to that realization until I was in my early f late 40s, early 50s that, you have growth in community, and you pushing the boulder uphill is far easier when you have people to push it with you. And the idea that when you have to show up as, "I got this, I'm strong, I got it," you end up feeling the stress internally. So I know that for a fact. Yeah, that's a very interesting. So I'm gonna ask you a different question. Let's just say that you're older and you're sending a letter or a message to your 40-year-old self, which you're not yet. So you're 60, and now you're telling your 40-year-old self, what is the new message you want to have her hear?
I think just finding joy. I think that's something that I'm starting to see, but I think I've heard, it's like not caring about the little things, just finding the joy, laughing more. Just, like I read a book this year, and, it was talking a lot about even just noticing the leaves in the trees, noticing the sun coming through. I read a chapter in my book, Red Thread, where I talked about, like, being stuck behind a train and, like, instead of being frustrated, like, picturing it as an art gallery of graffiti that you get to see and just, like, putting your car in park and just, like, appreciating the artwork for what it is, and so that's why I think I would tell myself, and I'm starting there, but I know I have a long way to go of just not being in a rush and just really laughing at myself, laughing at mistakes, like, just sometimes that's all you can do when things go wrong and just enjoying this beautiful ride.
I'm gonna give you a little one little tiny thing. So my biggest gift as I got older was I stopped caring what people thought. Just completely didn't give a shit. And as I like to say, I'm all out of shits. So I'm sorry. If you don't like it or you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I don't need everybody around me to love me. I need them to respect me, but I need them to like me. You don't like my life choices? I'm sorry. As long as you're okay with what you're doing, then what anybody else thinks is none of your business. It's so incredibly liberating. You have no idea. Like I show up as a completely different person now. I'm just like,
I love that. I feel like I'm more that way than I was, but it definitely is a journey, and I've heard that from other people too, that freedom of just not, not even considering what other people think. Yeah.
well, menopause has its downsides and then it has its upsides.
Oh, that's incredible.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Juliet Wright, for being with me today. That was a fun conversation about life, momhood, entrepreneurship, raising children. And I do invite you to listen to one of the podcasts. I had the CEO of Safe Horizons on a couple weeks ago, and she's the head of Safe Horizon, being the largest domestic violence hotline in the country. And I got a whole new appreciation for where and how that happens in our world. 1 out of 5 women in the country are experiencing it today.
Yeah, I actually listened to that podcast of yours. It was incredible. Yeah, one point she talked about was about victims advocates and how what a role they play. And I didn't even know what a victims advocate was, but I was assigned one as soon as I went to an abuse shelter, and they assigned me a victims advocate. And to this day, we don't keep in touch anymore, but to this day, I'm so grateful for her because she did walk me through every step, every paperwork, as I had to show up and fight things in court, like, she was there. My attorney was there, but she was there, and it's, like, really this role that I knew nothing about, and as soon as in that podcast episode you mentioned when she talked about victims advocates, and it was just like, oh, what a blessing, what an angel, because oftentimes, at least when I went through that situation, you don't know what you don't know, and it's so overwhelming, but again, that step by step, like, she literally just took my hand and, yeah, and listening to the episode, it sent me back to that gratitude that I had for her.
Yeah. We have gratitude for all the people that are doing the hard work, and I'm grateful that you're on the other side and you're entering a new season, a new chapter, and leveraging that red that you've got going on and the happiness that your face shows. So thank you again. I appreciate you being here and thank you for tuning in, opportunity seekers. Remember to tell us what you think of the podcast. Remember to subscribe and remember to give us a rating. Love and kisses. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Possibilities with Monique De Maio, where we unpack life as a female mover and shaker. If you like the show, please consider liking it or better still, subscribing to it and leaving us a rating. It truly does help. Also, you can pick up my book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. You can find the book, other episodes of this podcast, and how to stay in touch at moniquedemaio.com. DEMAIO. I look forward to seeing you again soon. With gratitude, Monique.